Okay, let us begin. Okay, so good morning to everyone. It is a beautiful day here in the Association of Devotees. We're continuing reading of Srimad Bhagavatam. I'm just going to pull up this verse for everyone. So this is the last verse of this chapter. Yeah, so let's see what this chapter was about, what this last verse has to share with us, what it means for us, and what we're going to hear about Krishna.
There's echoing going on.
Just mute. Yeah, there's some echoes.
It's me.
Okay. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam namaskritya naram chaiva narottamam devim saraswatim yasam tato jayatudidayet nashta prayesa bhadreshu nityam bhagavat sevaya bhagavati utamashloke bhaktir bhavati naishtiki. Okay, Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Okay, we're continuing. Let's just read this verse and we'll do some pranams and then we'll chant. Okay, text 26. Shri Shuka Uvacha Evam Raja Striyo Rajan Krishna Lila Naguyati Remireha Shutachitas Tanmanashka Manaska Mahodayaham. Shri Shuka Uvacha, Shukadev Goswami said, Evam, thus, Rajastriya, the women of Rajan, O king, Krishna Lila, about the pastimes of Krishna, Anugayatihi, continuously chanting. Remire, they enjoyed. Ahasuhu, during the days. Tachita, their hearts absorbed in him. Tatmanaskaha, their minds absorbed in him. Maha, great. Udayaha, experiencing a festivity. Translation. Sri Shukadev Goswami said, O king, thus during the daytime the women of Vrindavan took pleasure in continuously singing about the pastimes of Krishna, and those ladies' minds and hearts absorbed in him were filled with great festivity. Purport. This verse definitely confirms that the so-called pain of the heartbroken gopis is actually great spiritual bliss. On the material platform, pain is pain, period. But on the spiritual platform, so-called pain is simply a different variety of spiritual ecstasy. In the Western countries, people take pleasure in mixing different flavors of ice cream to produce wonderful combinations of flavor. Similarly, on the spiritual platform, Shri Krishna and his devotees expertly mixed the flavors of spiritual bliss, and thus every day was a treat for the gopis. Thus ends the purport of the humble servants of His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada to the 10th canto, 35th chapter of the Srimad Bhagavatam, entitled, The Gopis Sing of Krishna as He Wanders in the Forest. Namo Vishnupdaya Krishna Pastaya Bhutale Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swaminiti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvisesha Sunyavadi Paschatya Deshatanine Vanchakalpa Tarubhyascha Kripa Sindhuvya Vacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaura Bhaktavinda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Okay, stop share. Dear friends, I feel truly blessed to be in your association today of all days, starting a new year, and what better way than to be in your company and discussing Krishna nonetheless. And our relationship with him. So Let me just go back to this verse. Nothing ever works when you're streaming live. Okay. So this is the end of this particular chapter. I was thinking about it, and it's so the way it's described, that during different times of the day, the gopis are standing around doing their different duties, and they're just talking about Krishna. They're vibrating his glories. So I like this chapter to be referred to as transcendental gossip, because they just can't help it. He's on their minds, and that's just what they want to do. That's the most absorbing thing going on. And so the chapter ends with the gopis experiencing, or it begins with them experiencing pain due to the intense separation. So in the beginning, it's described in the first verse about Dukesha. So very unhappily, they're going around singing about his glories because they miss him. But then the chapter ends with the understanding that it's not pain as we understand it. It is the highest bliss, because their intense separation has brought this on, because they're absorbed in him. So we're going to discuss that. How does that happen? How does this pain of separation ultimately equal the greatest bliss? And that's going on for the gopis. And how does this relate to us, who are in a separate place than the spiritual world? So the gopis are worshiping Krishna by fixing their consciousness in him. And that was said early on in the chapter, in one of the verses, that just by having their consciousness absorbed in him, that is the worship. That's it. There's a heavy emphasis on the mind and the emotions in this chapter, and how it relates to Krishna, what it means for the relationship to Krishna. And so he's so stunning, and these are the descriptions that are being given to us throughout the chapter. He's so stunning that whoever captures him in their mind and heart, they become completely absorbed and stunned. So the rivers stop flowing, the gopis can't do anything, they can't go about their business, they're just literally stunned. And so even inanimate objects become stunned or become alive with the consciousness of him. So it's a really it's a situation we don't see so much. Probably in the material world, what you see, if you think back to, say, in the 60s, in the early 60s, when the Beatles were growing in popularity, and these young girls and all his fans, they were just completely overcome with their emotion, their love and their appreciation for this group of people, these individuals, and they would faint. There are videos of them like screaming. They can't do anything, they can't think of anything else, they can barely breathe, and then they just faint. But that's in the material world, and that's for people, sure, talented people, but yet it's not Krishna. So can you imagine how stunned you would be if you had been spending all this time with Krishna, and now it's daytime and you have all these other things to do, and you're just thinking about him. And the difference with Krishna is that the memories of Krishna, and this is what's happening for the gopis, the memories of Krishna, because he's so complete, the memories of Krishna are so complete that that's why they're singing his glories, because there is no difference between him and the pastimes of him, and remembering him, and the descriptions of him, and the qualities of him, and what he looks like, and what he's wearing, and what he's doing. So there's a quality of sameness and difference. Yes, it's with Krishna, it's the same when you think about him, but he's still not in their presence. And so it's an interesting thing. So heavy emphasis on the mind, that the functions of our minds and emotions, they're not so different than they are in their reality, say, outside of the material world. Well, while they're in their material expression, they're dulled, versus being complete, like you would have if you if we are in the spiritual world, or have that pure consciousness that's not covered by material elements. So we can imagine that our minds and our emotions have a different quality when we're not covered, yet we have them. And they're misguided for most of us. Our minds and our emotions are misguided because they're directed at things that are not Krishna. And this is the practice of Krishna consciousness, to redirect the emotions, the thoughts, because if worshiping him by fixing our consciousness on him, if that's worshiping him, then not doing so is deviating in a sense. It's just being distracted by the world. And they're being misused because for the most part, when we're under material covering, we use our minds and our emotions for our own sense gratification, our own pleasure, our own feelings of, or our own seeking of safety, of security, of growth, expansion, creativity, whatever it is. The difference with the minds and the emotions of the gopis is that they're being used for his pleasure. And so there's a big difference there. But mind and emotions, so thought and emotions, they're still there. So the Bhagavad Gita reminds us of this. One must deliver herself with the help of the mind, and not degrade themselves. So the mind is the friend of the conditioned soul and his enemy as well. It's not that when we come to full pure Krishna consciousness, we no longer have a mind and we no longer have emotions. We do. They are just of a different quality. They're not covered by the material elements, and they're not distracted by the material elements. And this is important for our practice, because we have to be willing to see very clearly, honestly, and with courage, how is the mind not serving me as a friend? How is the mind serving as an enemy? What is my relationship with this thing? And it's a very insidious thing often. And this is why it's the mercy of our association with like-minded people, is that they help us see that. They'll help us see where we're misunderstanding and the mind is kind of leading us astray. And then they'll be able to help us. So this association, not just with people in our lives that can help us see that, and they can lead by example in our lives. They can show us how to direct the mind, how to have a healthy relationship with the mind. That's one thing. That's one association. The other kind of association are the actual things that we associate with that have the potential to pull us further and further away from Krishna. Those distracting things that cause us grief because we're so absorbed in them. That's also something to be taken into account when we're associating, right? So let's talk about this grief a little bit with the gopis. So they're having these emotional responses. They're having grief, and they're singing of Krishna's glories in that grief and that pain of separation. So what is grief versus what is disappointment? And this is, I think, also important for us to know. And we see by the examples of the gopis what they're really grieving about. They're grieving about Krishna not being there. And there's a healer, Martin Prechtel, Central American shaman. He speaks about loss, the pain of loss for something or someone that we love is grief. The pain of loss for something or someone that we want is disappointment. And it's important to understand that, because what am I really disappointed about? What am I really grieving for? And the reality is that in our lives, there's so many things to be disappointed about. But the only true pain, and then keep pain in mind with the understanding of what's being said about pain at the end of this chapter, that it's a different kind of pain. There's the spiritual kind of pain, and that's the only thing that we're really experiencing. Yes, everything else we're experiencing disappointment in this life, but it's important to not confuse the two. I'm always going to be disappointed in this world. It's never going to fully give me everything that I want just at the right time, everything that I think I need. And this is not to, what is the word? To invalidate the disappointments and the griefs that we do have. We just want to put them in their proper perspective. And so philosophically, we can understand what's happening to us in our lives to be like a dream. So if you have a bad dream, you have a nightmare, you're really experiencing that, because your heart's racing, you wake up sweating, you wake up terrified, your body is objectively in a fight or flight or intense emotion reaction or response. Sometimes if you have ever had those dreams where you wake up crying, like bawling, just really, really in a lot of emotional pain, and sometimes not even remember what the dream was about. So in a sense, that dream is real. It happened, you had it, you're seeing the experiences of it. Perhaps it's with you throughout the day, you can't forget it, you're uncomfortable. At the same time, it's not real, because there's a difference between that dream world, that dream reality, and our reality. And so it's both. And so that also goes for our disappointments and our griefs in this world. So the best we can do is say, I acknowledge that this is what the world has in it. It's built-in disappointment and grief, because there is loss, because it's temporary. Which is another reason why it's described as unreal. It's unreal as in it's not permanent, it's asat. But because it's a reflection of something else that is real, what is that thing that is real? And that thing that is real is our separation from Krishna. And again, we can go into this for a very long time about, are we really separated from him? Are we not separated from him? That's another discussion. But the reality that's being shared here is that even if he's in our minds and our emotions are directed toward him, that is a way of worship. That is a way of being with him. And it reminds me of a point, and I would love to find this again. It's somewhere in Srila Prabhupada's writings, where he says specifically that he has come here to remind us of what we've forgotten, that he's come here to remind us of what we already know. And what is it that we already know but have forgotten because it has gotten covered over with the material world, with the elements and energies of the material world, and our understanding has been dulled. And that thing is who we really are, who Krishna really is, and what is our relationship with him. And so having that understanding is what helps put all those disappointments and griefs into a different kind of perspective. Now, grief is the only thing, I just want to make it clear, because there's a difference between having some kind of emotional pain and real grief for something or someone. Grief is I've heard it described that it's the one thing that the mind does, or the emotions do, that is not part of this, what we're talking about, the mind serving as a friend and the enemy. Grief is a real thing when we experience loss. It's based on love. And the attachments and detachments and the I like or I want, I don't like, I don't want of the mind, that is different. And that's the point that I'm trying to make. That's a different kind of discomfort than real grief. That being said, the grief that we have in this world is a reflection of the separation that we're really having being separated from our source and from our home. That's why the idea is back to Godhead. So in no way are we discounting grief, and it's actually very detrimental to our spiritual life to not acknowledge our grief for people or even our disappointment. It can really create a block in our understanding and our seeing and our clarity and in being able to direct our emotions. So this is what's happening for the gopis. So they are, what is our response to grief and disappointment? We lament, or whatever our thing. Usually it's some form of lamenting. But with the gopis, they're lamenting, but at the same time they're praising. And that's a very big difference. How many things can we when we lament them not being here, do we praise at the same time, and it brings us joy? It doesn't really work that way, except when it comes to love. When we grieve someone that is dear to us, it's said that is the other side of praise. That grief and praise are, when you're grieving something, you're praising it. When you're praising something, you're grieving it, because there's going to be a moment when it's not there. And so they're intricately connected. And this is what the gopis are doing. Their lament is their praise, and their praise is their lament. This is the highest ecstasy for them. They're doing both of these in ecstasy. We don't usually lament in ecstasy. We lament in like moroseness, or it's different. It's oh, poor me, why is this happening, can't see a way out. Yeah, and that happens. But for them, it's because their response is, oh, I lament, I'm going to glorify, I'm lamenting that I'm missing Krishna, that he's not here. I'm going to glorify him. And now they're feeling better. And so then they're thinking about him again, and they're telling more pastimes. And this is why it goes from they're experiencing pain and intense separation to this is not really pain, this is the highest ecstasy. And so that's just what's happening for them. The pain is inevitable, but the suffering is optional, right? They're choosing their response. And so going back to disappointment in this life, can we choose our response and remember what is there to really grieve about? And sure, there are real things to grieve about in this world, but what is the soul really grieving about? Because even those relationships with those people that we love are so dear to us, and we value, and we grieve them, those relationships are still temporary. Those people, they didn't actually go anywhere. They did. They went somewhere else, but they didn't disappear. No one ever disappears permanently. There's no such thing. It's ontologically impossible for us to not exist. So we think about it, someone's grieving us at this moment in another time and place, and we are here, we're okay, we're talking about Krishna, and we are grieving someone who is in another time of place, and they're okay, and they're probably talking about Krishna. And so that's just a little perspective for these things that are very real to us. If we don't address pain, grief, disappointment, we can miss some jewels in there, because we can see by everything that's being discussed here that there's a connection to our spiritual life. It's not separate from the griefs and the disappointments. Actually can inform, and our understanding of those things, our proper understanding of those things, can inform our spiritual understanding and our spiritual response to the world, to what's happening for us, to our experience. So, okay, so what is grief? What is disappointment? And what is our response to grief and disappointment? And then how do we cultivate what the gopis are doing, this response, this appropriate, loving response? How do we cultivate that? Because why do we want to cultivate that? Because it is our natural state of being. This absorption in Krishna, in the pastimes of Krishna. That's all we're really wanting to do. I mean, who else wants to do anything other than just play with the cowherd boys, play with the cowherd girls, walk some cows, take them out to graze, play in the rivers? What else do we want to do? Is anything going on here aside from the times where we come together and we talk about these things that actually elevates our heart and our minds? Is there anything else that's really going on that's that important or that blissful than to just play with your friends? And that's what's happening in the spiritual world. So that's why we're trying to cultivate this this understanding, because that's our natural state. We're just playing in love with our friends, with our friend Krishna, with our family. So it actually seems to be very simple. And it's what this chapter is talking to us about. How do we cultivate this absorption? You find what you love about Krishna and you tell it to others, because that's what the gopis are doing. They are remembering the past times, the times, oh, he dressed up like this and he was wrestling and he was doing this and he was doing that and this is what he was wearing and he had these feathers in his hair. And then they just go around doing that over and over. And then guess what? It happens the next day and the next day and the next day. And how often does that happen for us? That we are doing the same thing every single day, and we don't get bored. That doesn't, in this world, it's like Groundhog Day. You know, you have this movie where or these situations, that was a movie, but these situations where you get into waking up in the day and you have your day, and then the next day it happens again, the same thing, same people, same activities, same actions, everything happens like clockwork, and it starts to become a sort of torture, a sort of, what is happening here? I need to get out of here. It's not so with Krishna and his friends. They're doing the same thing every day. Every day it's fresh. Every day is new. Every day is filled with brand new bliss, and that actually increases, because as our, or for the gopis, as their love for him, and this is described both in the Bhagavatam and in many places, the Chaitanya Charitamrita, as their love for him grows, or they're acknowledged, they see his beauty, or they think about his beauty, he becomes more beautiful. And then as he becomes more beautiful, their love for him grows, and then as their love keeps growing, he becomes even more beautiful. And like, how does it doesn't stop. It just keeps going and going and going. And so spiritual Groundhog Day is completely different than material Groundhog Day. And this is how this is just a very simple way to be absorbed in it. Find what we love about him, find what we love about the devotees, glorify, start praising, start remembering, start acknowledging, and becoming absorbed in that. There's so many pastimes, and so many people. You can see here a whole group of people who want to hear about that, and we all want to be reminded. This is what Prabhupada did for us. He came to remind us about what we've forgotten, and we can do it for each other. We can remind each other. We can remind ourselves, or we can take from the Srimad Bhagavatam and from the other scriptures and let that be a reminder that all we're to be doing is being in this this ecstasy, that the discomfort, and oh, here's another thing, that this is the discomfort, disappointment, and grief that we experience in our lives, because we're in a human life. We can reflect, we can ponder, we can question. That can be the doorway to our highest ecstasy, to our highest bliss. If we explore it, if we understand, and we see what it is that the Shastra is giving us in that regard. So let's hear some of your favorite things about Krishna. Any other comments or questions around this topic? So beautiful chapter, and just really grateful for the example of the gopis. They're showing it. They're showing us how to be absorbed, or what it's like to be absorbed, and what happens to them when they're in their absorption. There's a word here in Sanskrit in the verse. I think it's the last word, or in the last, let's see, udayaha, experiencing a festivity. So they were filled with great festivity. So udaya is related to rising, to appearing. It's almost, I don't know exactly if it's related to the rising. Similar, can you make the analogy that it's like the sun, but there's a rising, an appearance of something. And what that implies is that it's already there, that this great festivity, whatever this word is pointing to, which is I think it's also described or defined as, it has a lot of definitions, but they're all positive. It's like fortune, wealth, and the rising and appearing of these things. So it implies that it's something that's already there. It's already in their hearts, and because we're part and parcel of Krishna, that's already in there for us too. And we don't need to create anything new. We're just giving, allowing, using our free will to set the conditions for which where this experience of a festivity will arise. It will come into our beings. I heard it said that Krishna consciousness is a festival disguised as a religion, a tradition. That's all we're doing. We're just having festivals. So yeah, I always like that idea. It's all about the festivities. So let's hear from you, dear friends. Yes, Adi Purusha Prabhu, Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, can you hear me okay?
Yes, wonderful.
Wonderful class. We always find it very refreshing. Your spiritual master is empowering you to just pour out this, your realizations and the nectar. It's such a profound subject matter. Sometimes they use the expression, a person who's drowning in his own mind. I've been academically and then experientially, I was in the field of psychology. And if you go into the psychiatric facility and you see people who have become dysfunctional due to the, like you were describing, the mind is the best friend if it's controlled, or the worst enemy if it's not controlled. And if we cultivate lamentation, if we focus on a selfish, practically criminally insane absorption in desiring something that doesn't really even exist, and we get so deep in disappointment. And there are so many people like that, to one degree or another, that are disappointed and unhappy. What is that? They said people quietly living life.
Quiet desperation.
Quiet desperation, yeah. They try to distract themselves from it with intoxication or indulgence or absorption in some kind of fruitive activity. But underneath, there's this underlying ocean of unhappiness that's so ridiculous and artificial, And so, the Purva Paksha in Prabhupada's presentation, he would talk about the bliss and the ecstasy and the sweetness of this longing for for because of their love for Krishna. But on the other hand, in the material world, like you mentioned, there are people that are drowning in their own mind and in terrible pain. And the pain of the mind is so strong that they'll even, I've seen people with the cutting on their wrists, or jumping out a window, or taking poison, or hanging themselves. I know a few devotees even, in my own experience over the course of the last 50 years. 3 of my godbrothers, who were good devotees, actually found themselves on the down slope, and neglecting their sadhana, neglecting from hearing from scripture, and neglecting staying in close contact with the shelter the spiritual master's offering, and they actually took their own life due to mental pain, destroyed their bodies, So there's that perverted reflection of what the gopis are experiencing. But Krishna is so wonderful. He's calling us out of that darkness. Tamasima, Jyotirgama. Don't stay in darkness. Come to the light. There is a sweet a pain. There is a sadness that is not just a selfish and bottomless pit of hopeless, misery, but a longing for, out of love, that they want to please Krishna. And you mentioned very nicely, how do you go from that misdirected quality of consciousness to the, at the other end of the spectrum, this ecstatic sadness, and the scripture describes, Prabhupada tells us, Bhakyamam Abhijat, only by devotional service. So the spiritual master comes, he points the way, and he gives us devotional service. And when we have a service to Krishna, just like the gopis, they have their different services to Krishna, and we pour our heart into that service, a tremendous healing takes place. It's called the miracle of devotional service. I believe in Lord Krishna, the cause of all causes, and all that is, all pervasive, lovely manifest. I believe in the miracle of devotional service. That by having a prescribed duty, taking it in our heart, just like Prabhupada took the instruction of his spiritual master in his heart, and then be completely absorbed and satisfied, giving every ounce of our strength and time and energy and attention to pleasing Krishna by that prescribed duty. We can go from this ridiculous lamentation for something that doesn't even exist to gratitude and joyfulness. There's a quote in the Bible, he has taken away my sadness and given me joy. So it's a profound subject. So sad to see people that are, we know a few people right now who are going through a manic depressive thing where one friend of ours, sometimes can't move out of his bed for 6 months because he's so depressed. This mental illness can be very, very strong. But Krishna is so wonderful; he can help us. Anyway, I mean, just kind of rambling. We're only reflecting things that you already spoke about, but it's a very, very important subject. So we thank Krishna for everything, just as it is, and we ask Krishna, no matter what, how can I serve you under this circumstance? And then we're uplifted. All glories to Srila Prabhupada.
Yay, all glories to Srila Prabhupada. Thank you so much. Very important points, that how we suffer. It's a very real thing. And I just want to mention, I've been working with Ramboru's Karuna Care.
Oh.
Her chaplaincy training, I did that a couple of years ago, or a year and a half ago or so. And this is a resource for devotees, non-devotees, for support in mental health and emotional health, dealing with trauma, dealing with addiction, dealing with grief, divorce, all kinds of things, all the things that make it difficult for us on a day-to-day basis, because it's really important. Two things, I think, to acknowledge that we're feeling this. You know, when Prabhupada came to remind us of what we already know, or who Krishna is, or who we are, he also came to remind us and to see that we're suffering. And so I think we have to, like he's saying, this world, look at it, it's not good. You know, we're not happy here. You'll never find happiness here. And that opens our eyes. But I think we have to acknowledge, yes, I'm suffering. We can't hide it. And there is support. We have to support each other. So many people struggle with depression and addiction, and even suicide, you know, ideations. And just because we know about Krishna doesn't exempt us from going through those things. So please reach out to each other, reach out to people you know that you think about, your friends, family, strangers. Ask your local barista how they're doing, and then point them in the right direction. So there are resources for these things, and it's really important. And you know, sometimes just being heard, witnessing someone, witnessing each other, is the greatest healing. We don't need to fix, you know, everyone's problems. We just need to have some empathy and compassion in Krishna consciousness, because we're all in the soup together. So thank you for bringing that up. I really appreciate that. Yeah, this crazy mind. Okay, anyone else? Any other comments? Favorite things about Krishna that you want to share? This is the equivalent of the, what do you call it? The water cooler conversations. We're going to talk about Krishna, this transcendental gossip. I'll tell you one thing I heard, everything. So yeah, Isabel said everything. Yeah, what's not to love? But one thing I heard that I never forgot was Krishna, the color of his skin is kind of iridescent. He's like a monsoon cloud, it's described as, but also if a leaf falls on him, where it touches him, it picks up the color of the leaf. It's every color, all colors. It must just be incredibly beautiful. Just, we probably can't even imagine what that's like. But imagine if he puts his hand on you, or you put, you know, your hand on his shoulder, then it picks up also that color. It's alive. Yeah. So I always remember that a leaf falling on Krishna's arm just has a, you know, a lot to consider there. What else? Anyone? I think we're going to 8 a.m. Is that correct? Which is in a moment. Okay. Well, hopefully we'll get some darshan.
Adipusha Prabhu, please say how wonderful is Krishna.
How wonderful is Krishna? Pulling us out of this crazy darkness and this drowning in our own minds. It's so easy to fall into like hankering and lamentation. Brahma Bhuta Prasanatmana Sochati Nakanchati. On the spiritual platform, when we're engaged in devotional service, there's no material hankering and no lamentation. We have everything we need. We can be satisfied. And we can even dovetail our propensity for lamenting that we wish we could please Krishna more. So wonderful. How wonderful is Krishna? I don't know if anybody's ever... I was drowning one time and someone came and rescued me. I was in Boy Scout camp out in the lake. And it's really interesting to be drowning, you know, when you cannot get yourself above water. And then someone from outside your ability comes in and sustains you, rescues you, and cares about you. And the spiritual master is like that. Prabhupada's rescuing us. How wonderful is Prabhupada? He knows. So, okay, here goes the conch shell.
Jai. Jai. Shri Shri Radha Mulidar ki jai. Korachandra ki jai. Radhamuli Dar ki jai, Gaurachandra ki jai.
Lila, Devi, dasi ki jai. Happy birthday, Lila. What's your realization? Happy birthday.
My realization, just stick with the devotees.
Yeah.
Find devotees and hold on tight.
Yeah. When Adi was talking about drowning in one's own mind, I was thinking that if it's just you and your mind, forget it. You'll be overtaken. But if it's you and devotees and your mind, then it's kind of piece of cake. You no longer drown. If you're deliberately throwing yourself in the association of the devotees, then it's so much easier to deal with your mind. And when you were talking about, say how they're doing, So it's so important when you kind of voice your difficulties, whatever you're drowning in, if you just voice it, say it out loud, then it just that diminishes it by 50%, and then the rest is taken care of by the association of the devotees. So we're all, I think we're pretty set here.
Yeah, we're in a good place. Yeah, thank you. That's true. A burden shared is a burden halved, right? So
Exactly.
let's do that for each other.
Yeah. Did
Have
you
a
hear?
beautiful Saturday, people.
Yeah. Thank you. Did you hear Amrita Kishore singing along with the song with Yamuna Devi? That
Oh,
was
is
her.
that who it was? I heard someone singing.
It's Amrita Kishore Chan. A beautiful.
Beautiful as usual.
Yeah. Amrita
Lots of
Kishore.
love to you, Amrita Kishori. I miss you.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Lila Devi. Wonderful class.
Bye. Remember
Follow.
your spiritual Groundhog Days. It will never get boring.
That's the name for this class. Spiritual Groundhog Day. Hare Krishna, everybody.